Okay. Well, let's talk the Donald Trump victory, and obviously that's sent shudders not only through the United States but through the provinces of the US, the satellite states of the US. Notably, I should hope, with Keir Starmer in the UK, but particularly with your Justin Trudeau, who I know Trump has his tongue very firmly planted in his cheek when dealing with Mr. Trudeau. He had a meeting with him recently, and
yes.
yeah, and so tell us a bit about the how you perceive it as affecting the relationship there, and what the dynamic might be from here on in, and how it will trickle onto the Canadian people.
Well, I'm not a depressive personality. I mean, I wouldn't think I'm unreasonably optimistic, but I don't wallow in doom and gloom and, oh, it's all hopeless, and, oh, why should I bother? Maybe I should just sink to the bottom of a bottle of rum or something. But even people who are depressive must be jumping for joy. Ever since Donald J. Trump became the 47th president of the United States, it's been a nonstop source of humor and hope. I call it the two H's, humor and hope. There are crazy dingbats on American TV. These four women, I think they're called the Group, but I might be wrong. Anyway,
The View.
The View, Whoopi Goldberg among them, with their hair shaved back like this, and they look like a collection of freaks. Anyway, so they had somebody on. I think it was maybe one of them, but she's becoming part of I think they call themselves the Four, and the Four, they've dedicated themselves to four things because Donald Trump got elected. They're not going to have sex for 4 years. They're not going to have children. Well, I guess if you don't have sex, you don't have children. They're not going to date, and I forget what else they're not going to do. But you wonder, have you taken me? Sorry?
I say, if you take a look, you find that they're all the sort of women you don't want to have children, and all the sort of women that couldn't possibly have children because of their monstrous visage and their, abominable personalities.
Yeah, and probably they would have problems finding even a blind man to do the dirty deed with. But anyway, these people apparently are serious. I doubt they'll carry. Whether these people will carry it, carry their vow for 4 years, who knows? But there are people, earnest female college students who are probably enrolled in feminist studies and gender studies, totally utterly useless, non-academic programs. I've heard some of them say, "Oh yes, this is a catastrophe. He's Hitler." The usual. He's Hitler. There's going to be a dictatorship, and of course, the usual collection of Hollywood or Hollyweird weirdos who say they're leaving the country. They're going to go to Canada. Oh no, we have enough weirdos here. The only one that I think who's actually left the country is some woman who has both Mexican and Spanish citizenship, and she's going back to Spain. Well, okay. America's gain is Spain's loss, but so on the comic side, that there is the absolute hyperventilating that's going on. On the hopeful side, number one, Trump learned a lot from his first presidency. He did not know Washington very well, and he got to Washington. He had some ideas of what he wanted to do, build a wall and so on. But he didn't have many people to rely on. And the people he leaned on often were what you might call country club Republicans, or in Canada we call them red Tories, or I think in Britain they call them what, wet? But anyway, these were people who were not really for his agenda. And so many of them were put in the cabinet or in key positions, and they let him down. Well, he's had 4 years to think about it and to plan. And even during the election, it was quite clear he had a seasoned, organized team. This time, he had the ability to really get the vote out, and what they call in politics the ground game. It's not just a matter of persuading people that you're the right guy, but you also have to get those people who are persuaded to get out to the polls and vote. And that's what's called the ground game, and certainly in Canadian and American politics. Well, anyway, the Democrats were generally fairly good at that. The Republicans were not so good. This time, they really got their act together. Elon Musk and others put a lot of money into a good organizing ground game. Also, legions of lawyers to monitor the counting of the votes. The United States has, well, each state is responsible for running elections, so there isn't just one pattern. But in some states, particularly Democratic states, you don't have to show ID. I mean, I've never heard of such a wackadoodle system. In Canada, and I worked in elections, federal, municipal, and provincial. The normal procedure is you get a card in the mail that shows that that you're on the voters list and tells you where to vote. So you show up at the polling station with your card. It's absolutely not necessary if you forgot it. Okay, and your ID, and so you have to identify yourself. Normally, it's very simple. You've got your voter's cards, you've got your ID. I process you and give you your ballot. You mark it. Now, federally, our elections are with paper ballots, which I think are the safest. I'm not as fond of machines that we have in some provincial elections and some municipal. The paper ballot, wholesale corruption is pretty difficult. When the voting is concluded, as the deputy returning officer for the poll, I ask if the candidates have a scrutineer there, they can come over to my table. I dump the ballots out on the table. I call them out, and my poll clerk or assistant starts marking them down and putting them in piles. As per candidate, the scrutineers can look, they can challenge. They don't know that's not really that's not a clear mark, or if somebody on the ballot puts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that wouldn't consider that as a properly marked ballot. But there are very, very, very few disputes. It is fairly difficult to subvert that system. I mean, I could tell you, well, 1 or 2 ways you could perhaps cheat for a couple of votes, but it's very hard. But key to that is the ID. You don't just can't just stroll into the poll and say, "I'm John Smith. I'd like to vote." That's the way it is, I believe, in some states, or if they're registered. Okay, you may say you're John Smith, but maybe you're not. Anyway, to prevent problems, the Republicans hired an absolute legion of lawyers for problem areas, and they did challenge a number of places. I won't go into all the particulars, but this time they were organized, and that is being the characteristic of the Trump campaign. This time he knows exactly where he wants to go, and he has the people in place to get him there. This time he's not scouring around the country clubs or Wall Street for somebody who may have a good reputation or whatever to be cabinet secretary of this or that. He has in mind people who will get him to his key goals, which is to secure the border, to deport the several millions or even more of illegals. He means that they're going to be gone. and to unleash America's energy exploration. In his first term, America became energy self-sufficient, as it should be. I mean, it's sitting on a fortune of oil and natural gas, but crazy environmental restrictions and so on under Obama had limited a lot of that. He got them energy self-sufficient. Biden promptly reversed things. Trump is going to be charging in there on January the 20th, and he's going to open up fracking, as he says, drill, baby, drill, and opening up areas that are being restricted for oil exploration. And that will start kicking in almost immediately, with the result that energy prices or oil prices will fall, which will have a huge effect on inflation. And there are other things, like he's also prepared to take on the whole DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Boys in, make-believe girls who are boys in girls' washrooms or on girls' teams. And that was, the exit polls show that standalone, clear, determined, no fudging around the edges, won him a lot of votes from people who didn't necessarily like him. He got a lot of women's votes, women who might have been convinced, well, he was maybe a bit of a lecturer or whatever. They found him maybe too brash, but they're prepared to overlook that because of that. This is huge. I see him absolutely focused. He's got one term. He can't run again. He's got one term, and he intends to achieve these things. He intends to keep these promises. And unlike a whole lot of politicians, where you wouldn't pay much attention to their promises. So this is colossal. And the other thing is, he is, I believe, going to do a purge of the American military. From Obama on, the military's senior ranks are being riddled with politically correct choices. Generals who are more interested in you using the right pronoun than in knowing how to use your rifle. And this has just rotten the morale. Recruitment's way down, because the type of person who wants to join the military is usually a virile young white guy.
Yeah.
Usually from a small town or a rural area. Yeah, there are a few Hispanics and the odd black too. But the military attracts people like that. And I've been many times to Tennessee. In Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, each state has a sort of a nickname. It's called the volunteer state. And the good thing and the sad thing. The good thing is that Tennesseans are very virile people, very loyal, very patriotic. They've enlisted far out of their proportion of the population in numerous wars. That's the good thing. The bad thing is, well, I shouldn't laugh. These wars have been against our people. The First World War, white man slaughtering white man. The Second World War, white man slaughtering white man, and a very, very vile cause, in my own opinion. That's the type of person who would be the prime candidate. This sort of person doesn't want to have to worry about the person next to him going through a gender change.
Or looking for their purse,
looking for and you see some of the clowns that are in the Biden cabinet. There's that one, I think his name is, I may have it wrong, Lewis. He was the Secretary of Health in Pennsylvania. He's also in the military, and he's something in the senior health department in Washington. He comes out in a skirt.
Yeah. There was that Sam Brinton too, who had He looked like, you know, he'd come off the set of Silence of the Lambs. He had shaved head, wore dresses. Yeah, looked like Jamie Gum. He was forced out because he had a predilection for stealing women's clothing from airports, not you know, from their luggage, not once but twice. Absolute conga line of clowns and buffoons. And then, of course, having no one to fall back on, they undemocratically make Kamala Harris, you know, who I swear, if she's not drinking, you know, off camera, you know, 10 hours a day, is smoking, you know, the devil's lettuce like it's going out of fashion, you know.
Well, yeah, and I remember I guess it would be a reception at the French embassy on the 14th of July, Bastille Day. That clown from Pennsylvania in its skirt showed up, and I think that one you're talking about with the you know, the bald head and all that, in some sort of female dress. I know the French are very, you know, tolerant sexually. But if I had been the chief of protocol at the embassy, I would have said, "You're insulting you're insulting my country. Get these effing clowns out of here." Yeah. I mean, you imagine the little yellow men in Peking. They're watching all this, and they must be wondering, you know, we can take these guys. I mean, if you've got these people, if this is your military or some of your military, you know, time and history are on our side, and this is going to be Trump is going to purge these people out of the military. He's going to get rid of DEI, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he's going to want leaders who concentrate on traditional martial values to make America respected. And there's more to what I think he's going to do, but I would think those are three key areas, and they will have a big effect on Canada too.
A very important job for them is in, you know, for instance, if I was Trump and I was sitting there, I would be looking at just pulling the CIA's budget, and we already know that they supply their own funds through their sales in arms and everything, you know, drug sales, everything the CIA does, etc. But it's very clear from the last 4 years who was really running things, showing that the CIA has is completely divorced from any notion of nationhood, and is simply operating on the kerosene of power and power alone. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they had a hand in the attempted assassination of Trump. Robert Kennedy has already vowed to unearth the truth behind the assassination of his uncle JFK. But that is an essential point to start, the reining in of the deep state, returning it, if it ever was independent. And we know, for example, that the FBI has been corrupt since its inception, because it had, and interestingly enough, a cross-dresser at its helm in
yes.
J. Edgar Hoover.
Well, I'll tell you a dirty little secret about myself. For years, I idolized J. Edgar Hoover. I thought, boy, like the TV programs, the FBI, you know, always gets their man clean cut, neat conservative, mostly recruited from Mormons and Roman Catholics. Good straight, and the guy's a cross-dresser in the pocket of the mob.
Yeah, and So, you know, and these institutions are obviously contaminated. So he's pretty much got to reset the entire foundations of the American state. Unfortunately, it will never be a white man's country again. And added to that, one of the biggest problems he still suffers from is that American psychosis with its religiosity, and that's the notion of Christian Zionism, and it's being beholden to Israel. So long as that continues to be a factor, they're going to get dragged by the nose ring into every morally abhorrent and, you know, impractical situation in Israel's quest for its Lebensraum, and it's on its mission to purge the true Semitic people from, you know, the its surrounding neighborhoods of the Middle East, and to set up a power dynamic, which it's currently doing with Turkey in Syria. That's quite a dismaying development. But getting back to Trudeau, and I'll just say, you know, having you relay before the security machinations in place for the voting and the polling booths, that's tragic on one hand for Canada, because it shows they duly elected Justin Trudeau. But how is he feeling? Because he does not have the great woke empire. The empire is no longer woke, and that is going to deeply affect his operations. Already Trump's visited him and, you know, threatened severe tariffs regarding the border crisis, etc. Is this going to send him scuttling back into his crab shell, you know?
If I could just go back to something you said about the deep state, then I'll speak about Trudeau. Sure. That was something I left out, but that's vital. Many of the American institutions, like the CIA, the FBI, the Justice Department, have been completely politicized. The FBI was going after conservative Catholics, going after parents who showed up at Board of Education meetings complaining about DEI or critical race theory. How are these people criminals? I mean, it's taking on the trappings of a police state. I think Trump, first of all, he's very aware of that. He may not have been so aware of exactly what the deep state was back in 2016. He's aware, and there are going to be changes. In fact, just today, the director of the FBI resigned, and yeah, and the man that Trump wants is a hard-nosed East Indian who I think will do good things. But anyway, you asked about Trudeau. Well, that's one of the reasons I'm hopeful. Trump is a tough. He's a negotiator, and of course, he wrote a book, you know, a couple of decades ago, The Art of the Deal. He likes doing deals, and as a good negotiator, you know, he certainly wants to show himself to be powerful. You don't negotiate if you can help it from a position of weakness, you know. There are things he wants, and so he read the riot act to Mexico and to Canada. On January 20th, there's going to be 25% tariffs unless you get the invasion over the border under control, and in Canada, and actually in Mexico's case as well, unless you start interdicting the flow of fentanyl. Fentanyl kills more Canadians, and I'm pretty sure more Americans, than the so-called COVID ever did. And I was tracking during the COVID scamdemic, I was tracking the monthly death rates in two Canadian provinces, our most westerly province, British Columbia, and Alberta. And every month, more people died of fentanyl than died of supposedly COVID. And that's another story. Well, was it really COVID or was it just the flu? And every year, lots of people die of the flu. But it's actually a form of aggression against white people, against North America. It's coming out of Red China. Or the components. Now, in British Columbia, we have a number of criminal-run labs that you can take. I'm not very au courant about what goes into fentanyl, but relatively available chemicals. You mix them together, and I don't know, you do some jiggery pokery and something or other, and you've got fentanyl. Now, Trump, his two demands were do something about the flow of illegal people. Now, it's mostly across the Mexican border, but in Canada, we've seen a big surge. It's only about 50,000 this year going into the States. It's a trifle compared to what's coming from Mexico, but it's something we can do something about. And it's our lax issuance of visas. There was a case about 2 years ago of an Indian family. They'd been recruited by a people smuggler, and they came to Canada and falsely claimed a visa. I think it was a student visa, but I'm not sure. Anyway, they landed in Toronto, and the snakehead or the coyote or the smuggler moved them to Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is over just up above North Dakota. And they were bused down to the border, down around Emerson on the American border. And they were told, walk there across the field, and after about a mile or so, there's a guy who'll pick you up. Well, they weren't properly dressed and they froze to death. Okay, big boo-hoo-hoo, get out there, get there. Next. But this was totally predictable. The East Indian who did it was the people smuggler, and some black who was recruited to pick them up on the American side of the border. They're now on trial in Minnesota. I think it's in Minnesota. But the point being, they should never have had the visa in the first place. We just aren't strict enough. We've got to get our act together. So screwed up is Canada that we've got the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who are a federal police agency, and we've got the CBSA, the Canada Border Services Association or group. The CBSA takes care of the designated crossings. So, like at Niagara Falls, you can cross into Canada, and if you come over the road, you come to the Customs and Immigration Office run by the CBSA, and you present. Normally you're just coming up as a visitor, but if you want to make a refugee claim, you make that claim there. Okay, supposing you walk 200 or 300 yards farther down the river, and you swim across, and the CBSA agent sees you. He can't do anything because, except at the designated border crossings, the RCMP is responsible for enforcement. So he's got to call the RCMP agent, get them to come along and fish the guy out of the river and arrest him. The years of neglect and absolute connivance on the part of particularly the Trudeau government for the last 9 years. He can't replace the white people fast enough. He doesn't care how they come in. They swim across the river, they run across the field. He doesn't care. And he is going to have to make moves to mollify Trump. About the fentanyl, they've got to take the Port of Vancouver seriously. Most of the fentanyl is coming in by boats. Well, you got to search the boats. If you have to double the customs agents, do it. You know, you're either serious or you're not serious. And you know, there both municipal police and the RCMP are going to have to take the underground fentanyl cooking labs more seriously and crack down on them. You make it you make that an important function. And never mind another seminar on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or making sure you use the right pronouns. Get out there and go after the bad guys. And I think Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago in less than a week after Trump's announcement. And he went down there like a whipped puppy. I mean, he wasn't a usual cocky self. You could tell he knew he was in the presence of the big man. He better behave. And
he gets a lot of that, doesn't he? Like that time Xi Jinping dressed him down. He's shown himself to be a yapping little puppy. And I would assume that the Canadian people are quite sick of him. And you talk about fentanyl, and I have seen some documentaries in your key cities there where it's just madness. Like there's open dealing and no-go zones. I've forgotten. Is it Toronto, which is the city with a real infamous street and a set of laneways? And there's just, you know, zombies from one end to the other. But I'm sorry, I
Vancouver.
Yeah, Vancouver.
Oh, Vancouver. Right. Vancouver is the elephant's graveyard of Canada for drug addicts. For one thing, it has a mild climate, so almost never is there any snow, at least at the sea level. So you can live on the streets. I mean, wouldn't be as pleasant as maybe living on the streets of Sydney, but you know, you won't freeze to death the way you might in Winnipeg or Regina. You know, I was out in Vancouver 2 weeks ago. I was out there in August, and when I was out there in August, I made a wrong turn after my evening talk, and I went through the really bad area of Vancouver along East Hastings Street. There was, like, on the sidewalks, which were quite wide, it was curb to wall people milling around, passed out, you know, zonked out, sleeping, drinking openly, injecting. I mean, you know, wherever hell is, this must be the outside door corridor, and no enforcement. The socialist government of British Columbia is very much wedded to safe injection sites.
Yeah, enabling it.
Yeah, they just basically enable it. So, but Trudeau is being forced to take that seriously, and whether he can do it, whether he can do enough to mollify Trump, I guess the next few weeks will show us. But what this is doing, what Trump is doing, is, I think, going to affect Canada's insane immigration policy. Trudeau has already started to reduce the numbers of immigrants from landed immigrants from 500,000 to 365,000 a year. That's still far too much, but there's a bit of a change, and reduce the number of visas. We have about 2.5 million people here on temporary foreign workers visas. They're not all that temporary, and then we have about 900,000 here on student visas. But very often they don't even study. There was a young Sikh, 20 years old, last weekend, shot to death in a public housing project in Edmonton. It was his third day on the job as a security guard. Well, he was here on a student visa. Why wasn't he in school? The whole system is corrupt. Trudeau is reducing those numbers a little bit. Now, none of that's not nearly enough, but the pressure is on. Canadians have finally seen the fact that the possible cost of housing here, not just in the big cities, like Vancouver and the Lower Main and the Greater Toronto area, but even in smaller places, the housing is almost unaffordable for most people. Well, the reason is all these people, and whether you're here as a landed immigrant or you're here as a so-called on a student visa or a temporary foreign worker, you still have to put your brown bum somewhere to sleep at night. And we are 3.5 million housing units short, and we're building housing at the rate of about 250,000 a year. Even if we up the 100,000, it's going to take over a decade. If we stopped immigration entirely, it would take over a decade to build the housing units to house the people we have here now.
I was going to say we have exactly parallel situation in Australia, and it's driven by the reliance by the fact that they privatised the education sector, and that has so much sway within the government, and coupled with the government's again a quasi-socialist government. And the government's reliance on just fudging, like they know that these student visas, they know that these temporary, there's a term for it, but necessary skilled workers visas, they're all baloney. And the migration agents, which are all people of their race, know it. So there's a big business in bringing them in. Most of them come from India. I don't know. We've both got that problem. It's like India must be empty, although they breed at a rate that it's, because I couldn't flick a tiny stone out my window without hitting an Indian and having it bounce off and hit another one. And of course, the impact on housing is a crisis in Australia right at the moment, and the crisis in housing therefore forces up all other costs which have risen, coupled with the climate scam, and so housing, rental properties are unaffordable. When they do build housing, it's not nearly enough, and it's in tracts of there's a link between architecture and mental health, right? And so they build tracts of these identical toolboxes, I call them, because they look like toolboxes, just rows and rows of them. But this is being driven by insane loads of these migrants coming in as students. I don't think they even capped the working hours. They did once upon a time, but they don't anymore. And even when they capped them, they go straight to their communities, who undercut wages because they'll work off the books for bloody nothing, exceed their hours, collect whatever benefits are available. They're schooled in that. I'll take it back to you because we're essentially talking about exactly the same situation as what I wanted to communicate.
It's eerie that it is the same situation.
Yeah.
By what you're describing, these soulless, almost Soviet era housing developments, it reminds me of that 60s song, Little Boxes, Little Boxes. They're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same.
Yeah.
And it's like, but And yeah, this Indian phenomenon.
Yeah.
I have a story. I don't know. Have you ever driven across Australia from Sydney to the West Coast to
Well,
Darwin?
I've never driven because I've never driven a car in my life. I've always
Oh,
lived in the inner city, but I have travelled mostly, in fact, exclusively on the eastern side. I have travelled to New Guinea, where there's also an inordinate amount of Indians and Chinese who the locals despise. But I'll throw it back to you.
oh yeah. Well, I was just curious. Well, I never had. Not me. I don't mean Australia. I've only been on the East Coast myself, but um, I've never driven across Canada, or even from the West Coast to where I live in central Canada, in Hamilton or the Toronto area. Anyway, for complicated reasons, uh, I got a car whom I'd given to my best friend, and she died. Anyway, I was driving her car from Kelowna, British Columbia to Hamilton. Thanksgiving Day. I didn't have much to be thankful for. The car croaked. The anyway, to make a long story short, I got a U-Haul van, much more than I needed, but that's the only thing I could get. They wouldn't car rental places wouldn't rent me a car to go one way. Okay, so I drove that van from Kelowna, British Columbia, which is in the interior of British Columbia, all the way to Hamilton. I probably stopped at least 15 Tim Hortons. Now, Tim Hortons is like Starbucks in the sense it's a countrywide coffee shop, coffee and donuts. Do you have Starbucks in Australia?
We have that franchise. We have Gloria Jeans.
Oh,
Gloria Jean, I should say, but we don't have the other. But from watching YouTube videos, I'm well aware of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Tim Hortons is not as she upscale as Starbucks. It's more working class. So basically, coffee, tea, donuts, and a few other little things. Okay, so a good place to stop along the way. But every few hours, stop, get out of the car, get out of the U-Haul, walk around, and have some tea or coffee or a donut. I stopped in at least 15. In all but 3, the staff were East Indians. Even
Yeah.
in areas of the country like Wawa in Northern Ontario, or sorry, Brooks, Alberta, or Battleford, Saskatchewan, where communities are almost all white, except for maybe a few Native Indians. Why is the staff all East Indian? It was a shocker. And I mean, I'm used to large numbers of non-whites in the big cities like Vancouver and Toronto and Mississauga and Hamilton and so on. But this was a shocker, especially in areas that, these people, they don't live here. What is happening? And my understanding is that they're temporary foreign workers, and I put quotation marks around temporary. They're brought in by some person, a company that has fudged things, because you're not supposed to be able to get a temporary foreign worker unless you can prove you've advertised and no Canadian will take the job. Well, I mean, come on, how much talent does it take to pour coffee and hand out a donut? Come on, this isn't high skilled stuff.
Well, we have the same sort of thing in Australia, and I know for a fact, and it's obviously not such a secret over here, but the companies themselves directly target those communities, because obviously Australians would take the jobs if they weren't beaten out of them because of the willingness of these people to take the, let's say, lesser paid service industry opportunities. Yeah.
Well, you see, from the point of view of the sleazy employer, temporary foreign workers are a good thing. They probably, especially if there's an under the table arrangement, so they work for even less. But you have these people, and you say, okay, you're on the shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and you over here, you're on the shift from 2 p.m. to closing time. And whereas if they have to recruit their own workforce from the community, they may have to do a little bit of timetable juggling. Maybe a university student can work from 3 in the afternoon till closing. A housewife with kids at school, maybe she could work from 9 to 3, but she is not available before or after that. Okay, it takes a little bit of timetabling. Whereas, if you can count on these East Indians, they don't have a choice. This is when you're working, and no if ands, or buts about it. But it's just terribly undermining, and it's not enforced. Yeah, what you were saying is there are Australians who are prepared to pour coffee or act in the service industry. Oh yeah, every hotel I stayed in, who's on the front desk? East Indians, and it's just third world, but not just the color. When I was in Regina, I said the many hotels have what they grandly call a business center in the lobby. That is a table with a computer, a printer, and okay. So fine. I sit down, and I want to print off what I call a map quest, or the directions from here to the next city. I turn on the computer, and it says it needs a driver. So I go to the East Indian on the front desk. I say, "Oh, the computer over here needs a driver." "Oh, I'm new." "Okay, you're new, but it needs a driver." The look of lost. I said, "Well, can I use your office computer?" "Oh, no."
Yeah.
Third world. I mean, I've traveled a lot in the third world. Sometimes things work well. Sometimes it's okay. Other times, they don't work. Nobody can do anything. All right. Another hotel. This is up in Thunder Bay, up at the top of Lake Superior. Same thing. It's the morning. I'm about to head out, and I want to run off the directions to the next city. I sit down at the computer. Well, this time it does work. It has a driver. I call up what I want, and I go to print it. The printer is out of paper. I go to the front desk. East Indian there. I said, the printer's out of paper. "Oh, I'm new." Well, I said, "Okay, you're new, but can you get some paper for me?" "Oh, no, he doesn't know where it is, Holly." So I have to write out the directions. This, you might say it's almost comical, but it's not. You pay a fortune at these hotels. This is not, this is they're not doing you any favor, and they just can't deliver the goods. This country is visibly slipping into third world standards.
Yeah, it's dysfunctionality. And another problem in Australia is that the construction industry is importing foreign builders with all their fabulous standards. We once had, superb standards in the construction industry, and now they've been surrendered to the accountants and its twin constituent, the immigrant. And it's appalling, and particularly obnoxious about the Indian is their love of being in an officious position. Going, back home he'd be a prince, be considered, the prime minister for holding such a, uniquely unimportant position. But it's creates the dysfunctionality, and it ruins community. For instance, you were talking about if possibly a housewife or a student were working there, and let's say the manager was a local, well, then they could build up a sense of community, even if they were getting passing traffic as a destination stop. It would still, you're dealing with people who know the country, at least, if they may not be from the area. And so in that situation, it helps to build a nationwide community. The community is lost, their communities aren't, because the very first thing they've got to do is stick together, but ours is surrendered for this, stupid goal. But I ask you, do you think if Trump's administration manages to create exacting standards, clean up the historic mess that the Biden criminal family and its CIA/neoconservative controllers have left behind, that it will have to impact and lead. I don't know how long Trudeau's got left. I understand he has, you're elected for a 5-year term there, which is a fairly intolerable length of time. But would it have an impact on how he ran the country, if nothing else for its proximity to the US and the necessity of sharing a border? And
Oh yes, definitely. Trudeau is incredibly unpopular. The opposition Conservatives have, for over a year, been ahead by 20 points, and nothing Trudeau has tried. Like just recently, he announced I think it's a $250 special bonus or check to everybody who was employed in last year, and a 2-month suspension of the federal sales tax. Well, actually, a majority of Canadians oppose these goodies and say that they will not vote for him. And the polling for the Liberals has fallen another percentage point. So even just shameless bribes won't work. He almost certainly will lose the next election, which is slated for this coming October. He's in a minority government. He may actually be defeated on a vote of confidence before then. I'm predicting, it's just a gut feeling, that the jig is up and we'll have a spring election and he will be gone. In the meantime, though, he's got to do something. And he's already making some preliminary moves on immigration. And I think the pressure will be intolerable, or irresistible. If the Conservatives win the election, Pierre Poilievre takes over as the Prime Minister, the pressure will be on them too to secure the border. And what Trump has done, and it's hard to remember 4 years ago or whatever, but since he lost to Biden, he's been talking about deporting illegals. Well, you and I would say, well, certainement, if they're illegal, out they go. But that term or that word deportation would have been, it's obviously like uttering a filthy obscenity in church when church still counted 4 years ago. Now 50%, 57% of the American people support mass deportation of illegals. And that type of talk will be coming to Canada. It really is irresistible. The tide is running in the direction of, number one, real immigration reform. Not nearly what you and I want, but there will be changes for the good. The tide is running against the Paris Accords. Trump will walk away from them, and there will be irresistible pressure on Trudeau and all his green crazies to cut back on carbon taxes and things like that, and restrictions on the oil and natural gas industry. And I think the economics will be irresistible, especially if they begin to pay off with higher rising living standards in the United States. Under Trudeau, we have lost about 25% of our standard of living. We used to be, give or take, roughly the same as the United States. In his 9 years, we've now slipped to about 75%. And I can see this, and I talk to people, even people who are not at all political. If you have a memory going back 10, 15 years, I ask, well, would you say we're better off than we were 10 years ago, or are we poor? Oh, no, we're poor. You can see it in the places that are dilapidated, places aren't necessarily all kept up. We're sinking into third world standards. And if America starts improving and rising even further, the pressure will be, I just don't see how any politician here can resist it. It's a force of history. Now, that all being said, we are being replaced in Canada. The European founding settler people will be a minority by probably by 2045, if not before. This is by policy. It started under Lester Pearson, and then Trudeau the first, and then every government since, liberal or conservative, kept in place a immigration policy that brought in people, 85% of whom are from the third world. Trudeau went crazy. He's brought in 3 million people in the last 2 years, and almost all of them from the third world. Like you, I wonder if I were to go fly to New Delhi, would I find any Indians there? They're probably all in Canada or Australia. So limiting the numbers, doing something about the illegals, tightening up the border. Okay, those are all good things, and I think they will begin to happen. What we need, though, is a moratorium. If we just reduce the numbers, all we're doing is lengthening out the time it will take before we become a minority. And we have to, frankly, we need number one, at least a 5-year moratorium. Secondly, we need an active program to deport anybody who's here illegally. So get rid of, probably in Canada's case, probably somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000, and then offer incentives, financial incentives, for remigration, for going back home. Because we are being replaced. And one example of what that means, once we're in a minority status, we will be in, they will crush us, because they've been hopped up on an ideology of hate. Our own government has said, you know, we're racist. We had a horrible history. We oppressed everybody. There's nothing good about our history until Trudeau the first came along. The newcomers are not told that there's anything here to be to attach to or to be proud of. If our leaders are ashamed of us, they will grab power. And there was an absolutely telling little video, and I can send it to you. So it was taken about a month ago in Surrey, BC, and Surrey's a suburb of Vancouver. And these were Khalistanis. These are Sikhs who want an independent state in the Punjab, and they're very radical, and some of them are quite militant and prone to violence. Anyway, this guy's on a megaphone. This is our Khalistan. This is not your country. Go back to, this is our country. Go back to England. Go back to Europe. This is our country. I thought, okay, he may be a nutter. I don't know, but he was in a large group. Nobody said, shut up or, get out of here. They will not only replace us by numbers, but they wish to take away our very existence. They think this is their land because they've been indulged in this nonsense.
Well, we've obviously been saying this for decades. It's obviously a problem within every European nation. We can expatiate on why that is, and where the concept and the strain of ideology that germinates, that resides. But this is a fact, and the only possible reality we all face is of some sort of balkanized situation. It's not just Indians that stand up in our country now and, assert their ownership of the soil. You've got the Arab community, which has religious reasons. In Australia, we've got the Chinese. If we go through Europe, we find a situation where we're being balkanized into just another community, and it will become a power play. Because the trouble with our parliamentary system, this fixed artifice of a bygone era, of an industrial age that's gone, this thing that cannot service the reality of the times, is that for this binary of left-right to exist, it has to canvass from these communities for support. How long till these communities assert their right to be a political bloc independent of the party's representative in of having a representative of either of those two parties, and they say, no, we represent the Indian community and we want to stand federally, we represent the Chinese community. It becomes a dogfight, and in that we find ourselves, well, we'll have to do the same thing. So the only realistic projection is the uncertainty of a balkanization of all European countries, and this sickness that started after the Second World War, this abhorrence of nationalism, the assumption that it leads to gas chambers and imperial adventures across our neighbours' land, etc. Australia had a sort of benign nationalism that did not brook those things. That gave us the White Australia policy, which was self-defensive and was abhorred the class structure. It was a very good model. It's illicit today to the establishment. It's illicit also to those that call themselves conservatives and even those that call themselves on the hard right. But it has to begin. I mean, America's lost. Regardless, they're just living on, a shared political philosophy at the moment that's rejected a lot that's been brought in by the neocons and the CIA that they're married to, etc. But at some point, there needs to be a resurrection of the national myth. And this, in both our countries, is going to entail, well, putting these hallowed natives in the spotlight and getting them to say, well, do you object to immigration? No, we don't. We just hate white people, imperialism, imperialism. Well, then enjoy it, because if you're a minority now complaining, you're not going to exist at all. We've got to detach from the myth of their possession and ownership, because that's what leads to our dispossession and their own dispossession. We need to rehabilitate national myth, and then we're just going to have to fight for our own spot. We can't have children because the feminist movement, the liberal infiltration of the important instructive institutions for our societies have trained women to reject the notion that they are there to bear children. So, birth rates fall. Whites have always been.
Hello? Can I just fine, thanks.
I'd like to know what guns did you want to shoot tomorrow?
I guess
Paul obviously taking a call here.
Okay, I'll see you at 4:45. Before 5. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's all right. So, to sum up, I see it as an inevitable balkanization for white European countries. Those that we call the neo-Nazis and sects of white nationalism have it in their head that this can be solved by building global white unity. Well, that's not said. A people belongs to the country they belong to. It's incumbent on us to recognise each other, but support each other in the quest to re-establish ourselves in our countries, not create some amorphous, vague notion of that. But I'll get your thoughts.
Well, in general, I think we should have, white unity throughout the European world, or certainly a dedication to no more fratricidal wars. That's another thing that encourages me about Trump. Trump is not an imperialist, and I think he's realistic enough to know that that conflict is and wars are just bad. We shouldn't have to spell out why, but except for the arms industry, which I think is extremely powerful in the United States, and rather likes the idea that there's a war in the Middle East and a war in the Ukraine. And anyway, I think he is going to. I think he's going to work very hard to prevent wars. It's unclear to me how that will work in the Middle East. He is pro-Israel, of course. There's no doubt about that. I don't know if that's just a tactic. Having grown up in New York City, you could hardly be anti-Israel and be elected to anything other than maybe the dog catcher. He may put a this is going out on a limb, but he may put a premium on settlement and peace. I'm not sure he will want to let Netanyahu do what he wants to do, which is, I think, to purge all the Palestinians out of Palestine and create that that Zionist dream of Samaria and Judea and Samaria, or basically the land from the Nile to the Euphrates. That is, I think, the long range goal, not just what's now Israel and Palestine. I don't think Trump will go for that. I could be wrong. but I think that is important. Okay, balkanization. I know, on the American context, going back, I guess almost 50 years, there's been the idea of the ethno-state. Somehow America could be carved up so blacks are in someplace, the deep south, and certain cities, and the Mexicans would be somewhere else, and whites might be in what's called flyover territory. That's the area between the two coasts, which are very liberal and left wing, and there may be something to that idea. The bringing it about, I think, at least to me, remains hazy. How was that going to happen? I take a more aggressive view. This land is my land. Canada was built by the European founding settler ancestors, and that's not to deny there was a little bit of assistance from some Orientals and the odd black, and the native Indians were here, yes, but they weren't the First Nations that they claim they are. But we know from anthropology, whites were here first, not the most recent iteration, after 1634, but going back probably 10,000 years. But I'm not prepared easily to give up the whole of my country. I would like a unified country and a much reduced third world population. Stop any more coming in. That's the purpose of a moratorium. And then deport the illegals. I would reduce the numbers further. And then incentives for third worlders to go back home, which might be attractive to some. There's quite a lot of evidence that many of the people who came to Canada recently are very disappointed. They were sold a bill of goods. Their jobs are minimum wage, hard to get ahead, housing's impossible. Just what wasn't what they were told. They could be incentivized to go back home. It works both ways. They would be less of a burden on us. They would be gone, and they would come back to their own countries, better off. But at least for the short term, we simply have to stop the invasion. I think Trump will do that to a large extent and deport a lot of the illegals. I don't know if he has a white nationalist view of the future. I just don't know. I know you and I do.
I doubt very much he does. But one thing that makes him the enemy of the deep state is this America First policy, which is quasi-isolationist. Obviously, given America's admittedly still existent clout, they will be reluctant to let major, chess plays act out where the security of America is concerned. But being American first obviously means concentrating inward and resisting the neoconservative desire to spread power. And that was something I was going to raise with you. I mean, the nature of the neoconservative once relied strongly on the myth of the American good guy versus the the bad guy. And that was married to the national myth of America. Well, what the hell have they become? Because they've happily dealt with the weirdos and the rainbow of freaks from the socialist side, so again, just like the CIA, of which, of course, the neoconservative fraternity is dependent. They're just interested in naked power, and that can only be for the benefit of a 1% of beneficiaries. But that's one area where I believe that even if Trump is ardently a supporter of Israel, it's still not going to help Israel, because he will be reluctant to compromise the security of America by allowing arms to be funneled there. He certainly won't want Americans drawn into their bold adventures for their Samaria from the Nile, etc. And I don't know how much Israel can pursue that without some assurance of American military backing there. Once that hypocritical ethno-state of Israel, because don't forget, we must be multiracial, but they, the ones that come throughout Europe, throughout every white country to shame us, to inveigle their way into our law-making and policy-making decision process to ensure that we're bred out of existence, migrated out of existence. Once that's brought to heel, well, there could be a cooling off of the planet whereby we can start to reject this shame. We're reliant on the upcoming Generation Z, which, if you can rely on the commentaries you find, because these things, of course, are impossible to quantify in real terms, but there's a sentiment of a rejection of the last 50, 60 years or so of self-hatred among the people. Again, it's about fostering the myth. If we can win the culture war to regain the myth and the positivity of our existence, outside of what's replaced it with temporary gratification, pornography. I mean, look how polluted our culture's become. Pedophilia, where did that start to multiply and become such a fixed illness within the society? The loss of conscience. How many sociopaths and psychopaths have been bred in our community through this detachment from community, from a prevailing morality, etc. I'm not a Christian at all, but I do see the value in having a moral framework. I've got one naturally, but obviously, a lot of other people need to the encouragement of a carrot and a stick. Well, I might get your last comments, because we've gone well over the hour there. It's been, and I don't feel like we've really touched on it. We're always just scratching at the door of what we really want to say. But I think we've expressed, covered the fact that a rehabilitation of America means a recalibrating of Canada. We've recognised that even if this happens, and even if the populism of a rejection of what we've been up against happens, we're still faced with the same demographic winter. And
I see some incremental improvements. America First is really good. It begins with pride. No longer is America ashamed, and George Washington was a slave owner, and everything in our history up until Obama was bad. Same thing with Canada. There is a reaction to the trashing of our monuments. Our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, many of his monuments are being torn down because he allegedly was a racist and wanted to exterminate the Indians. That's absolutely false. I mean, that's not true. Yeah. There's a reaction against that. So the idea of America first, pride in yourself, pride in Canada and Australia, I think that is the beginning of a turnaround. And once I've felt for at least 20 years, once we have white pride, then we're going to start having white power. But if you think you're trash, if you think our ancestors were disgusting, that everything new from the third world has got to be better than us, well, you've set the stage for your own replacement. But once you believe you're good, you're valuable, our history is good. Yeah, we've had the odd wrinkle, of course, but we're good people. We've done good things. Then I think we're in the mindset of, yeah, and we have a right to exist and to continue to exist. And no, I don't want to be swan. I don't want to, the land that, at least on my mother's side, has been in our European family for 350 years. I don't want to be replaced and displaced by policy. It's worth working on policies to reverse things, and I do think that's possible, but probably not as far as you and I want for the moment. But I really do think the tide is beginning to turn. Thanks, in large measure, to Donald Trump.
Indeed, and I tell you, I got into a bit of a online fracas on X yesterday, which I note that you are unfairly banned from, regardless of Elon Musk's promises, and so is my friend Nick Griffin. But this fake Aboriginal was promoting the template rubbish. I believe it originated in Canada, and they use it everywhere. You know, the elevating, the putting on a pedestal of the noble, the savage, and we've got this rubbish over here, welcome to country. It's a ceremony that was actually devised at the last minute by a Aboriginal comedian who was at a gathering of Indigenous people and realised the Aborigines are the only ones that didn't have a silly dance with smoke and leaves flying everywhere. So he came up with this rubbish by dancing, and it's been adopted as if it's existed since, you know, they were walking amongst the giant lizards 60,000 years ago. It's bollocks. And I said to him, well, you know, how about a little bit of cultural recognition here? We've got our welcome to internet ceremony. You know, this is white man's magic here. You know, do you respect our welcome to internet? You know, come on, let's have a little bit of bending of the knee. But as soon as that crap is knocked off, and the understanding that they didn't build anything, they did not build the country that feeds them and pampers them and you know, doesn't do all these horrible things that they say to them. As soon as that's taken, as soon as that wire is taken from the frontal lobes of our national consciousness, then we can begin to rehabilitate, because it's been a shame inculcated into generations by socialists and agitators, etc., that grew up in a generation and then filtered into positions within the education system, into government, into politics, into everything. But that's getting old now, and everything has a cycle. Everything has a life cycle. Everything has a positive to its negative. Everything has another side. And as soon as they put the two and two together, look at the death of community, look at the death of identity, and factor in the fentanyl crisis, and they'll realise why all these people got nothing left to do. They're beaten out of jobs, they're beaten out of education, at that by these DEI policies, etc. They got nothing to do. You know, they got to work 5 jobs just to barely pay the rent on some caravan somewhere. So why not just bomb out and forget about it, and make some Colombian cartel warlord rich. And that's the thing. We point the finger at South America and their warlords, etc., and we create the same things in our cities with these drug dealers that set up microcosmic versions of that same thing through the drug trade. It's
there's a ritual that we've adopted in Canada after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that looked into residential houses and Native Canadians. I won't go into that, but most public meetings of government bodies, school boards, etc., and many corporations begin with something like this. We meet this evening on the unceded territory of the whatever tribe, who have been here from time immemorial, etc. Now, the implication of that is guilt. And as I said in Vancouver, we get pretty cheeky. There about 2 weeks ago, I said, we meet this evening on the land that our European ancestors built, the land on which we built roads and hospitals and ports and communities. And we meet tonight with no shame. We've got to reject this bullshit, and it is. Each particular area, the story be a little different. We meet tonight on the traditional territory of the whatever Indians. Well, in most cases, it wasn't traditional. They may have been there for 100 years or 200 years. Yeah. And how did they get that territory? Well, they massacred a previous tribe, genocided them. Well, don't give me this bullshit. And I would further say, well, look, we probably are meeting tonight on land that was once owned by Farmer Jones. We didn't steal it. Whatever house I'm living in right now was, when Farmer Jones sold the farm, this became a parcel of a farm. Sure, I could recognize Farmer Jones, but I don't feel any guilt. We didn't steal it from him. If there was a different recognition, we're meeting tonight on land that was once settled by whatever Indian group, and we have settled since, etc. If it was purged of somehow of guilt or the implication of wrongdoing, that might be different. But we have to recover our pride, and that's why I am more and more urging people to, if you have to have any invocation at the beginning of the meeting, if it's not going to be a prayer or our national anthem, which is not O Canada, but which is the Maple Leaf Forever. But okay, if you're not going to do that, then don't use the guilt swing in. It's just a badge of demoralization and wrongdoing. We're all bad. We must have somehow stolen this. We didn't steal it.
Yeah, and I tell you, every government website you log on to has an acknowledgement of country. It's a template that's come from Canada, and it's created a thriving industry for scamming Aborigines and fake Aborigines, particularly the fake ones. It's amazing that the Aborigines never call out the fake Aborigines, because they're the walking testament to genocide, the interbreeding and destruction of a unique people. It's just a scam, and it's on everything, and it creates a false history, because that's the next phase, is jazzing up how good these people were. Well, in fact, they went to the moon before we did. You just never heard about it. I had this argument with the idiot I mentioned earlier, who said Australia, Aboriginal land, it's sovereign. It was never ceded. I said, how is it sovereign? I said, the Constitution, the Aboriginal Constitution. I said, so you had 250 languages, so many different tribes. Which language was it? Did you have an especially good translator conversant in all of them? And they were able. I said, so obviously it's bullshit. You just don't want to know my truth. You don't want to. That's it. They fall back on ad hominem attacks and ignorant. They love the word ignorant. They love to say you ignorant, you're ignorant. Every one of these fake abbos who I've come across who's ignorant of the fact that they're in fact contributing to the genocide and the disenfranchisement of the real ones, who, by the way, are living in crap areas and don't have a view on any of it because they live that day to day, and they don't give a damn because they're not in the cities being agitated by socialists and Trotskyites and exploiters. You know.
Well, we need to do exactly what you're doing, Stanley, to speak the uncomfortable truths. Here and there in Canada, there have been people who research, okay, which Indian tribe lived on this particular tract of land. Okay, how long? Time immemorial. And in one spectacular case, the land along the Grand River in southern Ontario was given to the Mohawks and Chief Joseph Brant by the British, Colonel Haldeman, because they had fought on the British side in the American Revolution, and they were going to be genocided for being on the wrong side. So they were granted a very substantial tract of land along this river. Okay, they can't say we were here from time immemorial. No, you were here from about 1795. Okay, where did Colonel Haldeman get the land? Well, he didn't. He bought it from, I believe it was a tribe called the Neutrals. He bought it. He didn't steal it, didn't genocide them. He bought it. Okay, how did the Neutrals get it? Well, about 200 years before that, they genocided another tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't give me this bullshit. You're from time immemorial. It's not. You know, that's not to say as Europeans and whites, we always did everything right or were always fair. No, we had our faults. But the myth that's being created is one to demoralize us. And I see a triple whammy going on. The powers that be, partly for greed, partly for crazy idealism, and also among some of them, hatred of white people, want to replace us. Okay, they're replacing us. But along the way, they want us to accept our fate. And that's what all this negative propaganda is for, this guilt mongering. Oh, well, you know, we are pretty bad, aren't we? And then in Canada, with what the Americans call affirmative action, or we call employment equity, or DEI, by deliberate prejudice against white people in hiring, reduces economically. So invade us, try to overwhelm us, demoralize us, and reduce us economically. It's a you know, I hate to say it, it's a conspiracy.
And cancel our culture. Well, we've gone quite over time there, so I will wrap it up. It's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, I know. You walk with this knowledge every day, and the reason the elites and the political class, it doesn't bother them, is because they're cosmopolitans, they're internationalists. They don't have to live in the communities that they create, you know. I mean, as soon as you ship them to their doorstep, they'll have something to say about it. But because they live so detached, they don't know what a loaf of bread costs. They don't know what, you know, no, it's ridiculous. So they can afford to, because they belong to a community. They're the elite, so that's their community. they don't have to broadcast that, and that's why we're the deplorables, and that's why the
Right.
madness of the Democrats in America. Why these Hollywood's celebrities are scratching their heads, going, "But why don't these disgusting little plebs, you know, do what we want them to do? Why won't they do what we tell them to do? I mean, they were disgusting, unwashed filth. Surely they could. Well, you know, exactly because of that. That's why Trump won. And hopefully, if the common sense can play out on just that first step, you know, it's not a racial step. It's not a unifying racial step, but it's a first step, as you say.
Yes.
Let's not be the insane purists that you find in this movement. Let's take a step at a time, and then
I agree.
slowly, as the Chinamen say, slowly catchy monkey. You know. Well, thank you very much, Paul. And next time, I hope to bring Jim on board, but we're definitely going to talk again.
Yes.
And I enjoy these chats. I hope you do too.
I do. This has been a really good one, Stanley. I really appreciate it.
And a warning, though, we do get minimized by YouTube. I mean, they've essentially sent me an email and said so. We're but at least they haven't deleted the channel. It just means it doesn't get the shares that the chats that I have with, say, Nick Griffin, Tom Sunic, yourself should get. But you know, and to those viewers out there that ask, why don't we talk to more Australian nationalists? Because there are none. Where are they? The Australia First Party is the only place that they reside, and that's a tragic state of the white diaspora voice in Australia. So it's tragic when you have to call yourself a diaspora in your own country. But there you go. Thank you very much.
Okay, and you'll send it to me soon.
I'll send you the link. I'll see you later.
Okay, great.